Hey folks, thanks for tuning into the channel today. I'm going to be talking about everything you need to know about the VA home loan benefit, how to use it in Puerto Rico in the year 2025. Going to try not to go over too much old information. I'll hit the big ideas and try to be as brief as I can. I know I can be a little bit long-winded. But I will do my best to hit the big things, share some tips that's going to help you use your VA home loan benefit this year, 2025, in Puerto Rico and beyond. Let's jump in. Okay, first up, the general benefits, general things about the VA loan. Obviously, you have to be eligible for it. If you're not sure if you're eligible, we look for what's called a certificate of eligibility. If you don't know where yours is, haven't seen one in years, no problem. It's something that I, as a loan officer, can find for you if you have one. And I can tell you, even if you used it before, even if you have a current VA home loan out on a different property right now, I can tell you all those things. It's something that I can help you with, right? So feel free to reach out to me if you're not sure if you're eligible and want to know. That's going to be number one. Some of the best benefits, obviously, no down payment requirement. That's huge. We can finance the full appraised value, right? The appraised value. That's what you get 100% of, the appraised value. Not above that, not for repairs, not for if you're pre-approved for $400,000 and you want to buy a house for $200,000, they're not going to give you $400,000 for a $200,000 house. It's you get 100% of the appraised value of the property, right? Awesome benefit. So that's one. Another thing is no mortgage insurance in your monthly payment. Not property insurance, mortgage insurance, right? So that's going to help reduce the monthly payment for you if you're a veteran borrower. And there's also, we can stretch income. That's another great benefit of this program. We can stretch somebody's qualifying income a little bit farther, get you a little bit more purchasing power, a little bit more house for your dollar. That's another huge benefit. And then there's awesome buyer protections, right? If you're a veteran buyer or active duty, if you're a service member borrower, you're going to get access to things like there's the VA amendatory clause, which helps protect your deposit, right? So it's like it amends any contract and says that if it appraises low and we're not able to get you to the closing table, your deposit is protected. This is a little bit controversial in Puerto Rico because most properties on this island are sold as is, not subject to appraisal. And if you explicitly sign a document that waives that amendatory clause right, then it becomes a little bit tricky as to like, well, the amendatory clause is federal. Puerto Rico has these, state conventions. So it's going to really kind of depend. Did you sign that away, or when did the people sign the amendatory clause? So that can get a little bit, but there is still the protection for the veteran buyer's deposit. So that's another huge benefit. There's also protections to the veteran buyers of what kind of fees you can be charged, right? So like you can't, it's not like any other loan programs where just like, we see these junk fees getting thrown in by all these different entities there to close and people sticking their hand in the pot. No, for the VA home loan benefit, there's going to be protections. There's specific fees that are not allowed or only allowed in certain circumstances. So that's another benefit. And then we had the VA's support with the appraisal process, right? So if it appraises low, there's what's called the Tidewater. I'll come back to that here in a little bit. There's also, if we want to do a rebuttal on the value, we can get some support from the VA for that as well. So there's loads of benefits that the VA home loan program is special for, and that it gives these borrowers. So let's talk about the main requirements, right? I'm going to look at three big areas. We're going to do credit, we're going to do assets, then we're going to do income, and then we're going to do minimum property requirements. In my opinion, that's the order of importance, right? So let's jump in first with credit. Credit, I wanted to start there because it's the easiest one for us to verify on the loan application side. And it's the most flexible, right? So like the VA does not have a minimum FICO score. You can have your credit in the toilet and it's possible that the VA could still help you with getting a home, right? So typically lenders though, it's gonna kind of bottom out around 580, right? If your FICO score is 580 or below, that's might be some challenges. It's going to you can have a higher FICO score and we still may not be able to get you a loan because it really depends on why the score is so low. If it's because you went through a divorce and things got a little bit beat up and you're on the mend, that's cool. We can we'll very likely be able to help you get a loan. But if it's because you missed recent mortgage payments, and like that's going to be a killer, right? Like if you've missed recent mortgage payments on another property that you've got, even if it's not a VA loan, like your payment history is going to be a super big factor. So credit, Easy for us to verify. Our company, we only do a soft inquiry on credit, so it doesn't cost you anything. I only need 4 pieces of information in 30 seconds, and we have that there. So that's credit. Easy for us to get and very flexible for the VA loan. So next, let's talk about assets. So the savings, the funds that you're going to need to get closed. And you might be thinking, well, wait a second, this is the VA loan. I thought I don't need any money to buy the house. That's not true. With all due respect, I don't know who's out there telling veterans that they can buy a house with no money. Maybe in some circumstances, if you can get seller credit and lender credit, then you can help cover your closing costs. There still are closing costs because there's still a title company, there's still an appraiser, there's still homeowners insurance, there's still these other entities that are going to charge things. And if you were able to close on a loan before and use no money, that's either because the sellers were giving you credit, which is extremely rare to get in Puerto Rico. It's just seller credit is just, that's like a unicorn down here. There's very few deals that we ever see seller credit on in this island. And so that's one, and or lender credit. So for taking a bit higher rate, which your loan officer may or may not have told you is what's going on, but if you take a higher rate, they can contribute what's called lender credit that helps cover your other closing costs. So yes, you're likely going to need some savings, some funds to get to the closing table, even using your home loan benefit. We already said that there's no down payment requirement, but then there's going to be closing cost requirement. Now, the VA does provide some support there, right? So there's certain fees that you're not allowed to be charged. One that gets a little bit tricky sometimes is a notary fee. In Puerto Rico, this is a little bit different because the only people who can sign and like basically preside at the closing and say that you are who you are, and they draft up certain documents and stuff like that, are attorneys. But in Puerto Rico, they're going to be called notaries. It's like a very specific like legal definition that's a little bit special here on the island. And so if you see on a closing disclosure or on a loan estimate that you've got like a notary fee and you're a very savvy VA buyer, and you're like, hang on a second, I'm not supposed to be paying notary fees. It's not like a notary like a notary public like we have in the States. It's like it's a slightly different thing. That's going to be an attorney, and that's likely the attorney who's either drafting the purchase and sale deed or drafting the mortgage deed, and that person is going to need to be paid. Typically, their fee should be 0.5% of the loan amount and or 0.5% of the purchase price. Kind of depends on which deed that they're creating for you, but that is a possible fee that you're going to see, right? So that's a big one, so one to be aware of. Another new fee that is good for you to be aware of is if you're using a buyer's agent and you as the veteran borrower are going to be paying for your own real estate agent's fees. Yes, that's allowed now. There was like a whole settlement that happened in 2024, like in the fall of last year, where it used to be the case that under no circumstances could a veteran borrower pay any real estate agent fees. Now that was kind of perceived as making veteran borrowers like less competitive in the marketplace, because if you, let's say that you want the help of a really good real estate agent and you're willing to pay them out of pocket yourself, well, you are essentially prevented from doing that, prevented from getting that help if you wanted it. And so now in 2025, you are, as a veteran borrower, you are allowed to pay for a real estate agent fee. Like for your buyer's agent, you can pay that fee. And so that is, I think, is a helpful thing, but it's kind of up to you, right? This would be a conversation if you want to work with a buyer's agent. And this is another huge myth in Puerto Rico, right? There are good buyer's agents on this island. I know them personally. I've used them to buy my house. And so like, if you want to work with a buyer's agent, that can be arranged and you can pay for it. That's allowed. That's going to be something that you're going to see in your closing costs, right? But it's one of those things, you get what you pay for. If you want it to be that the seller's agent splits their commission and that your buyer's agent gets paid that way, that can be accommodated too. Again, this is going to be a conversation with your buyer's agent, and you have to also make sure that whoever the listing agent is, that they're going to be willing to split their commission, right? Because if you're typically in the lower side of the price range on this island, if the listing agent wants to make their full commission, they may not be so good at returning the phone calls of your buyer's agent. Like I said, if it's in the lower part of the price range, that's going to be from about $250,000 on down as far as purchase price. Those folks, they want their full commission and they're less responsive to returning buyer's agent calls. It's not, you could have the most amazing buyer's agent in the whole world, and they're just going to have a little bit more challenges perhaps getting their calls returned because that listing agent doesn't want to split their smaller commission. Higher price ranges, I see that this is less of an issue. But guys, that is a possibility now. I think it's a good thing that veteran borrowers have more control. They're able to pay for this fee if they want to, and if they don't want to and they want to keep that savings, then they're entitled to do that. And another great benefit is that there's no maximum loan amount, right? So in 2025, the max conventional loan amount is $806,500, right? So if you have a whole bunch of income, good credit, that's the biggest conventional loan that you can get. But VA, there's no limit. We closed one not too long ago that was for $2 million. We can go all the way up to, I've seen it all the way up to $3 million with no money down. It can even be a multifamily property, right? It can be a 2, 3, or 4 unit, still with 0 down. That's a huge, huge benefit for the VA home loan. But another thing that you might run into, and another reason that you're going to have some savings, is that in Puerto Rico, as we said, most properties are sold as is and not subject to appraisal. This means two things could be possible. If it appraises below the contract price, they're going to look to, and you signed a contract that says that you're buying it not subject to appraisal, they're going to look to you, the buyer, to bring that difference in cash to get closed. Obviously, that's going to factor into higher closing costs, right? Another thing is the vast majority, I don't think I've seen a contract yet on this island where the property's not being sold as is. All the properties down here basically are sold as is, which means if you sign a contract and says as is on it, and then a VA appraiser goes out and says that it needs some repairs, they're going to look to you, the buyer, to pay for those repairs to get done before closing, right? It's not like, oh, yeah, well, I wanted to fix that up anyway. We'll do it after it closes. No, it has to be done before it closes. So I'm going to talk about that in a section of this video about the minimum property requirements. But these are some of the factors that can go in. So yes, you're going to need some funds to get closed, especially in Puerto Rico. Closing costs here tend to be a little bit higher. Then if you add in the fact that a lot of properties need repairs before closing, that's a factor that increases costs. If you add in the factor that some people choose to pay above appraised value, well, that's going to be a cost at closing too, right? And so you see how this is one of the ways that the average closing cost in Puerto Rico is going to be a little bit higher. And when there's no seller credit and rates are a little bit on the high side and there's no lender credit available, well, you can see that like right now, the cost to get into the property might be a little bit higher in Puerto Rico, even using the home loan benefit. But thankfully, there's things that we can do. Specifically with the VA, it's very flexible in terms of how we structure the lender fees. We can roll certain lender fees into the rate, though it will go up, so that needs to be accounted for. Or you have the control. You can pay things separately. It's one of those things where your interest rate and your closing costs are in a give and take, right? VA is great because it lets us structure those lender fees however it is that you want it to be, right? So like we can, if your priority is to have the lowest rate, that's fine. We can accommodate that, but your costs are likely going to go up as if you're buying points to get the rate down, if you're rolling, if you're paying things separately at closing to get that rate lower, versus the opposite. If your priority is to have the most savings at closing, well, then we can roll things into your rate, but then your rate is going to go up, right? So it's about exploring these options and finding the best fit for you. All right, so we've talked about credit and assets or savings. Now let's talk about the most important factor, which is going to be the income, right? Income is the most important part. You can have amazing credit, you can have all the money in the bank, and if you don't have a qualifying income, I cannot help you get a VA loan. I'm sorry, that's how it works. And so what sources of income does the VA like to see, especially when you're buying in Puerto Rico? So if you have VA disability income, that's great. We can use that. No matter where you live, no matter if you move to the island or live some other place, that income will follow you wherever you go in the States for the rest of your life. That we can definitely use. Other type of income that we can use is retirement income, right? If you have a pension, a 401k that you're paying from, an annuity, anything like that, that we can definitely use to help you buy a house in Puerto Rico. Social Security income, that we can definitely use. That follows you no matter where you are once you start receiving it for the rest of your life. That we can use to help you buy a home in Puerto Rico. Employer income. Okay, this is where things start to get a little bit different, right? So not different, actually. This applies to any type of a loan if you're buying your primary home, that's what the VA home loan is for, right? It's if you're buying your primary home. And so to do that, the lenders want to know if you're employed, will your employment income is your employer on the island with you, or will your employer allow you to move to the island, live here full-time, change your addresses, update bank accounts, start paying taxes to Hacienda, all those things? Will your employer continue to pay you the same if you're on the island and they're not? We need it in writing that they will, Okay, that's what we really need. We need it in writing, a letter from your employer stating that, yes, I authorize my employee to live and work from Puerto Rico full time, right? If you can get that in writing, then we can use your employer income. If your employer's here on the island, then we can use that income. If not, then there's not going to be a way. It doesn't matter how many days you're going to spend on the island, how much you love the island, how much family you got here. None of that stuff matters. They're not going to ask about it. They only care about if you're going to be able to repay this loan and if your qualifying income is from if your qualifying income is from a employer that's not on this island, well, they're going to want clarity in writing that that employer will continue paying you with you living on the island. Another situation is if you're active duty and you're assigned to live in another place and you want to buy a home for your spouse, that it's going to be their primary home here on the island, that is allowable. Next, let's talk about the minimum property requirements for buying a home with the VA benefit, right? So the VA has what they call minimum property requirements, and these are things to ensure that the property is going to be safe, secure, and sanitary for the veteran buyer, right? Which is great. These are like buyer protection things. However, what it tends to look like sometimes in Puerto Rico is that oftentimes it's very common because it's like a higher bar than for other types of loan programs. It can be the case that when a VA appraiser goes out to a property, they might notice more things that they're going to ask to be fixed, like chipped paint, like loose handrails, these kinds of things that we might not have been dinged for, like appliances if they're not working, these types of things that we wouldn't see with other loan programs. But this is to protect and to provide a safe, secure type of a space for VA buyers. And so I think that that's a good thing in general. Now, when it comes to buying in Puerto Rico, these are some of the more, if you're out there shopping for properties, these are some things to be looking for, right? So that you can help like avoid a giant headache of like, you go under contract, send a deposit, we're working through the process, and then we're like, get stuck with needing a ton of repairs. So they're going to look at the structure and the structural integrity of the property first. So think like leaks, right? If there's cracks, if there's leaks coming through windows, coming through ceilings, if there are drains that are stopped up and they're not leaking or that they're not draining properly, those are going to be things that are going to get called out. And those are things that are going to need to be fixed before we can close. Okay. And if you sign a contract that says as is, they're going to look to you, the buyer, to get that, to pay for that and coordinate it all before we can close. Okay. There's not going to be a way to roll repair costs into your regular purchase loan. There are like VA rehab loans. We don't honestly have them. I'm not aware of a lender that does them right now on the island. And so these things are going to have to be fixed before we close. Another category is systems. So like think things like the electrical system all needs to be working well. There can't be exposed wires in different spaces. All the panels and everything need to be set up correctly and not have gaps, and they need to be properly covered. Those kinds of things. Think plumbing, right? So the plumbing all needs to work. There needs to be hot water to all the sinks. There needs to be hot water to where you do the laundry. The sinks in the bathroom, especially if there's like a utility sink outside, that's not going to need to have hot water. But typically, any fregadero, right? Any sink where you're going to wash dishes or washing hands, like bathroom sinks, the showers need to have hot water. Also, can't be the hot water heater that, like, if you've ever seen the one that like plugs in above the shower head itself, that's a no-no. We can't do those. So all those things, and any appliances that are already installed need to be working, right? If it's just like there's no air conditioning in the house anywhere, that's not a problem. But if there are AC units that are installed and then they're not working, that might get called out as needing to be fixed. Another huge type of repair that gets called out often is septic systems, right? So if the house is on sewer, like a public municipal sewer system, and that's how the waste gets treated, well then you're good to go. But if there is a septic tank, and if it's an old septic tank, watch out for that. That might be something that you ask the sellers or ask their agent about. Are they confident that septic tank is working properly and that it's going to pass a VA appraisal? Definitely something to ask. If not, then you may not want to make an offer on that property, right? Unless you're going to be willing to pay to replace and put in a new septic tank, which I have seen that happen before. But that's you got to factor in several $1,000s at least for that type of repair. Ideally, we want to make sure that the septic system is working before you're making an offer on it. The property also has to be safe, meaning that there can't be any evidence of pests, right? Sometimes it is the case that we are asked to get a pest inspection. Usually only costs about $100 100 to 150 bucks, but pest has to be pest free. And another one is with safety is handrails, right? So any change in elevation of 3 feet or more, so like, around a balcony, stairwells, interior or exterior, any change in height like that, there's going to need to be handrails that are installed, and they cannot be loose. Okay, this one gets called out very frequently, so that's why I'm kind of emphasizing here. But handrails is an important aspect of safety, so make sure that it's got barandas that are installed and working correctly. Now, what happens to a VA borrower in process if the property either appraises too low, like lower than the contract price, or if it needs a bunch of repairs? If that happens, obviously that's not ideal. It kind of cuts both ways, right? It's because it's gonna, maybe it means that you can now buy that property for a little bit less than what you had on the contract, but it might mean that you have to come out of pocket, right? So where we're going to look to figure out what's next is at your contract, right? That document that you would have signed, it should say in there what happens if it appraises low and what happens if it needs repairs. But in Puerto Rico, very often, if you signed a contract that says not subject to appraisal, no sujeto a tasación, that means that if that's it and you signed it, now you're going to be asked to pay that full difference in cash so that we can close. If you decide to walk away, then you can try to rest easy and use the amendatory clause, which is a feature of the VA home loan program, which means that if it appraises low, that you're not responsible for paying that difference. But again, if you signed a contract that says that you would pay that difference, and then you try to say, oh, but the amendatory clause that everybody signed is going to protect me, this becomes maybe a gray area. You could be in a sticky legal situation where the sellers don't want to accept it, but you don't want to pay extra, and then that can get kind of contentious. So we want to, before you sign a contract, make sure it can say not subject to appraisal on it, but you definitely want to have a limit to how much you're going to be expected to ask to pay above appraised value. So think to yourself, for whatever the property is, how much would you pay above the appraised value? Would you pay $500? If it pays $500 light, would you bring an extra $500? What about $1,000? What about 2,000, 5,000, 10, 8, whatever? Think to yourself, what would you pay above the appraised value? And then you can get it into the contract where it says, not subject to appraisal. However, if it appraises more than X amount low, I want to be able to either renegotiate the price or walk away and keep my deposit. That's usually a happy middle ground that sellers will like the fact that it says in their contract, not subject to appraisal, but you're protected and that you have a limit to which you'll be asked to bring additional cash to get it to close. And plus, like we said, you have the amendatory clause, which is a good protection, but only right if everybody understands and accepts and has signed it. Okay, that's a different thing. What happens if it needs repairs? Again, we're going to look at the contract. If you're buying it as is, that means that you, the buyer, are going to be asked to pay for whatever those repairs are so that we can get closed. Now, again, this is another space where I encourage people to put in some kind of a limit, right? What if everything in the property looks great? You walk through it, everything looks fine, everything looks beautiful. I didn't see any problems. Let's just sign to say that it's as is, and then come to find out that the septic tank is too close to the house. It's a beautiful, brand new septic tank, but it's too close to the house, and now you have to pay $15,000 to move a septic tank that was brand new. We just installed it. It's brand new. They said that it's working great. It didn't look like it needed anything. Well, now you're on the hook for $15,000 of repairs because you signed that says as is and you didn't notice anything wrong. Remember, it's not just you looking to see if you notice anything that's wrong. It's a VA appraiser that's going to look to see if they notice anything that needs to get fixed, right? And so that's an example of a thing that you could pop up. And if you have it in your contract that you will only pay up to $5,000 worth of repairs, I'm just pulling that number out of thin air, then you're protected if you find some big crazy thing, or if you just make it subject to the inspection coming back all clear. That's another type of a way that you can get some good language in there to protect yourself. So general tips, if you're looking to use your VA home loan benefit to buy a home here in Puerto Rico, one, it has to be your primary home. Your income has to either be here or will follow you here. That's the most important thing. Two, make sure that you have a good amount of savings, right? Because like I said, a lot of properties here are sold not subject to appraisal, so they might ask you to come out of pocket if there's a difference. They're sold as is, which means they're going to ask you to pay for repairs if something gets noticed. And closing costs on this island just tend to be a little bit higher. Like I said before, there's things that we can do where we can roll certain fees and costs into your rate, but then your rate's going to go up, right? So if you can pay those things at closing, then you're going to see lower rate options for yourself. So having some padded savings is definitely a good tip. Another one is that you can use a buyer's agent. It used to be the case where VA borrowers were not allowed to pay their own real estate agent under any circumstances. Now you have that option if you want to. So if you have a good buyer's agent and you want to make sure that they get properly compensated, because you get what you pay for, you can do that now, and that's a nice update that we haven't seen in previous years. And the other tip that I'll tell you is that if you're starting this process out, get pre-approved before you find the place that you want, right? Because it happens too often that people, they start looking for properties and then they find the place that they want and then they call me to get pre-approved. And then they're in a big rush and they want to know if they can afford it and they want to know what the rates look like and they want to know how much it's going to cost while they're trying to negotiate a contract. Guys, that's backwards. You should get pre-approved first. Know what all your financial situation is. Know if there's any surprises on credit. Know if you have enough savings and know if you have enough qualifying income, and then go find the right properties that's going to fit and meet the minimum property requirements and fit inside your budget, right? So if you want help with that, feel free to reach out to me. I'll have all my contact information in the description below. But guys, thank you very much for watching. Sorry if I tend to ramble on, but hopefully it's some valuable information that you can use to use your benefit in Puerto Rico to buy your home. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.